So Chuck Higgins, please kick us off here this afternoon, buddy.
Okay, thank you. Make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so thank you, Sarah, for having, Radio JOVE, sort of co-host or co-lead this year's Eastern Conference. And we're gonna browbeat you for the next couple hours with some Radio JOVE. So I'll get it started. So this talk is, to update you on the latest Radio JOVE kit. So we've had to make some accommodations, and some adjustments because parts not being available, and so we're calling this 2.1. And here is a list of sort of the core team leaders for Radio JOVE. And some of us are in this professionally, and many of us are not. So we've got several of us we consider citizen scientists, and this is what NASA, or how NASA defines citizen science. But Nicole is going to talk a little bit more about that later, so I won't get into that. But as you know, Radio JOVE has been around a long time, and we're in it to educate and get people excited about radio astronomy and do some science. So I'm not going to go through all these dates, but I just put this up here to give you a little bit of history. So it started with a meeting at Goddard Space Flight Center in 1997, and then formally started in '99 when we sold our first kits. And we got some initial funding from the director at NASA Goddard to get started, and then it sort of lightly snowballed after that. So initially we were partnered with the Inspire project to distribute our kits, because they had a mature project and a way to distribute items. So we relied on them initially, and then after some retirements, then kit distribution came to me I should have said, I'm at Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I'm a professor of physics and astronomy there, and so I did the distribution for a number of years, and a big change happened. Around 2015, we got a fairly large grant, an education grant from NASA, and that allowed us during this time to develop some of the hardware we'll be talking about later. And so over the 20-ish years, we distributed the initial Radio JOVE kits. Over 2,500 of those were distributed, and then parts were too hard to get. And then we went to Radio JOVE 2.0 and switched to the commercial SDRs and the software. And so now we are, and those SDRs are no longer available. The SDR Play RSD-1A models. I mean, this is the entry-level model, and for a reason to try to keep the cost as low as possible, we use that model. So now we're on to the 1B, and that's what we're calling Radio JOVE 2.1. And throughout this whole time, we've had a very nice, long, and prosperous partnership with SARA. So thank you for that. I always put this in my slide deck because, but I'm not going to talk about why, because you already know why. So I like to tell people why radio astronomy matters, and Ed already did a nice job on Sunday. So this is the overview for Radio JOVE. Of course, it's a multi-frequency It's a spectrometer to study Jupiter, it's where the name Jove comes from, and solar radio emissions and the galactic background. And occasionally some interesting terrestrial propagation. Dave Topinski is going to talk a little bit about that and the science projects later. And some extragalactic, or I should say galactic sources through some scintillation we can get. But, starting around 2015, we started switching from being an education and outreach only project to try to do, see what we can do in the science realm. Could we do some publishable science? And so trying to upgrade the equipment and calibration, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. And giving people the hands-on experience and maybe some projects they could do with it. So that's the goal. That's been our history, and we're rolling right along. I always like to acknowledge and thank the partnerships we've had over the years. So this is the heliophysics group. Education group out of essentially out of headquarters, NASA headquarters. We partnered with them. More recently, there's this Sunrise mission, which is a CubeSat mission that's going to launch some low frequency receivers in a 6-unit array and to look for solar bursts. So we're partnering with them. That's to be launched. I think it's now slipped to even next year. It's a launch date. And over the last year with the eclipses, with Solar Max, and with Parker Solar Probe, closest approach, some folks at NASA have deemed the heliophysics big year, which is, I guess, a bird watching term, to coordinate a lot of effort to study the sun. So we've partnered with them, and of course SARA. And the most recent funding, which actually has just ended, is a citizen science seed funding program. And so it remains whether they're going to have another call for future funding. So I've got my eyes on those funding calls to make sure to see what's going to happen there. But one thing I like about Radio JOVE and SARA and other projects like that is that we have a really nice and strong community. And so for us, of course, we have a lot of information on our website. This is federally funded stuff. So anything we produce, we put out there for anyone to use for free. Any of the images on our website, data. Now we like to acknowledge people who contributed the data, but any pictures that people upload or you see on our website are free to use. Credit is nice, but it's not absolutely necessary. We have an email listserv, as you guys do too, that has been pretty healthy over the last 5 or more years. So that's a great way to keep in touch with people. We also have written up some training modules, and this was a project with the Sunrise mission team, education team, to try to help people learn a little bit about radio astronomy and reading the spectrograph, how to interpret what a solar burst is, that kind of thing. So those are, I forgot how many there are now, 6 or 8 of these modules that are videos, and you can go through. And I was happy to learn that Carmelo went through all of them or some of them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
8 of them. Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. But, so I have some plans to try to do a 2.0 version of those at some point. So we have a Google Observers map that unfortunately doesn't get updated quite that often, but so that's another way people can find out who's out there, to keep in touch with each other. And we're pretty conscious of the fact that if you don't want your name or exact location out there, we don't care. If you just give us a city or something would be fine. So we don't want to publish any information you don't want out there. And as you know, we try to coordinate observing campaigns, and we have a data archive. And Larry Goddard, who's online with us today, many of you know, has a live data streaming, so you can see what that's in North Georgia, and you can see what data are happening at the moment, and it's a great way to compare if you're running your own system, compare data with what he's got. And you know, typically we all or many of us, the dedicated ones, post data if they see solar or Jupiter almost daily on the listserv. It's just showing, announcing what plots that they got, or what emissions they were able to observe. So it's a great way to check. This is just an example of you know, U.S. and Central and South America, a little bit of South America map of the people that we knew had Radio JOVE kits. Now, we don't know how many of those are actually operational. And I just put pins on the map wherever I sent the kit. And again, I asked people if they were okay with having a pin on the map before I put it there. And then after the 24 flips, I just marked those in red who actually contributed data. But this is the 2.1 system now. So it's not that different than the 2.0 system, except for the receiver has changed, so some of the software. But as you know, it's the antenna, single or dual dipole antenna with the commercial receiver. And again, we're using the SARA Play model and RSP1B now. And with some intermediary software, which I'll talk about. And then of course, thank God, goodness, whatever for Jim Sky and his software, because that's really the bedrock of our data recording and essentially storage. All the manuals are online on our website, so you can get the antenna manual, get the receiver setup and operation manual. And here you see the block diagram. And so there's essentially really now 3 pieces of software. These are the 2 intermediary pieces of software to convert the data to be able to interact with the Radio Sky spectrograph. And here's the bad news, I guess. These things aren't cheap. Initially, in the conversations initially, we were trying to keep the original Radio JOVE kits under $100. And I think the first ones were 120 or something, and they've just kept going up. But when we switched to the commercial receiver, and certainly coax and copper have really gone up recently. So for the entry-level kit, it's almost $300 now, and then you've got the extra cost for poles mounting the antenna. So it's certainly not an inexpensive introduction, but we're trying to keep it as low cost as possible. And the antenna does require soldering, but if you don't want to solder, you can have it, pre-made. Dave does a great job making these, and a little higher cost there. So why the dipole? It's a simple antenna. This is what we started with, and the single dipole is perfectly fine for solar observations. We wanted the second dipole to give you a little more gain and be able to phase it, give you some directivity to point it at Jupiter, because those signals are a little bit weaker. And there's a lot of cool physics in that two dipole system. It's essentially a double slit experiment there, and interference. And so it's not the only antenna, but that's the one we ship, and it's fairly easy to put together and set up, and semi-portable, right? And so the new receivers are the SDR Blade 1Bs are 14-bit, and they give you a good 8 megahertz bandwidth, and that's been the switch over to the SDR systems has allowed us to switch from a single frequency, the initial Radio JOVE system, to this spectrograph with the software. Has really been a great advancement, not only for people to get interested, but also for the science aspect. So the SDRs, you do need a PC with a little horsepower, because they use a bit of your RAM. So you need, there's some minimum requirements here. And the advantages of now the 1Bs, so why we had to switch the software again, is to allow for the different architecture in the 1B model. But it's very flexible now system, and I'll talk about here in just a minute. The cost is still, modest. The performance is excellent, and the software I'll talk to you here in just a second gives you the ability to actually get the audio, which we couldn't with the earlier model. So the new intermediaries, one of the new pieces of intermediary software is called SDR Console. And so this was thanks to Larry Dodd, who worked with Simon Brown and to get this software and make it work for Radio JOVE. So this is the software that will essentially control the SDR. And you've got, again, you get 8 megahertz bandwidth, which is fantastic. You can obviously change your center frequency. We choose 16 to 24 megahertz because that's where 16 is, you're getting toward the low end of the ionosphere cutoff, but also Jupiter happens to be, Jupiter starts to trail off above 24, 26 megahertz. So that's kind of the sweet spot for observing Jupiter, but of course the sun is very active there as well. And you can pick any of the channels and demodulate that and actually listen to it. And on Larry's YouTube channel, where he's got the live data streaming, you can also pick up. He's got the audio channels with it as well. So another major advantage of this piece of software is that you're not limited to this SDR. As you heard Richard and Jacob from Appalachian State the other day, they're using a much fancier SDR, much wider bandwidth. And this software works with it. So it has the flexibility of using multiple kinds of SDRs. You do not have to get the SDR 1B, one we're using with the kit. And this is the other piece of software that is needed to, and this is all free software, right? This won't cost you anything, and it's downloadable anytime. This takes the output from SDR console and formats it in a way that Jim's Radio Sky Spectrograph can now can read. So there is a data repeater function within SDR console here, and you turn that data repeater on, and that's what the SDR console to RSS, fancy name, that's what it does. And then the Radio Sky Spectrograph software now can read and display this the output. And of course, not only read, display, Jim's got analysis capabilities. I'll kind of mention that a little bit later when we talk about the calibrator, and archiving capabilities with this. So it's really a wonderful piece of software. And this is just an example, 24-hour spectrum, just showing you. And this is my site in Central Tennessee, nighttime versus daytime. So you get the idea how good a site or how noisy you can get during the daytime. And you can, of course, enter metadata, which is we try to emphasize for science observations. Calibration I'll talk about later, and then you can do some correction, correct your background, or do some spectral correction within this software, which is very, very nice. I just put up a few example observations here. Dave's going to talk a little bit more about these later, so I won't spend too much time here, but just to give you an idea what some strong solar bursts look like. Some Jupiter here that Richard and Jacob showed you the other day. The weak solar bursts and the radar sweepers there, the ionospheric sounders. And then there's some terrestrial propagation from distant lightning. We get these interesting shaped features in the spectrum. And again, Dave is going to talk a little bit more later about science experiments, but I just wanted to show you how some, in this case, this solar event, how it compares different locations. And what we're trying to do in terms of more science is, okay, we can talk about how there's relative differences between these sites. What about an absolute, making absolute measurements, and that's where calibration comes in. So we can maybe compare how much the ionosphere is changing as a function of location. You could do a latitudinal study if you had that, enough borders. So, and then you see, the type 3, this is a type 3 solar burst, and then there's some features, some type 2s here. And of course, the radio fade out associated with it. So our archive is there. It's got more than 6,000 records now, and some of our more dedicated observers and ones that have more scientific value actually get archived at NASA's Planetary Data System out at UCLA. Again, I'm going to talk about the calibrator a little bit later, but you heard about the TFD arrays yesterday, and you've got so that one is capable of doing polarization, but there's other ways to do polarization measurements, and so the Francisco array, I'll talk a little bit about that in Jupiter later. And so I'll just summarize that Radio JOVE, is forced to adapt a little bit. So this is our latest iteration using these newer SDR Play models, and the new software, the SDR console, is very flexible, and we're still active, and we're trying to get people through some training modules to some beginners to maybe help us get involved. And certainly the SARA site has some great intros to radio astronomy. So I don't think I have any would be any problem if I wanted to cross-link some SARA sites from the Radio JOVE site. I can't imagine you would have a problem with that. And as I said, we're trying to do a little bit more science with it, with these new data, because the quality is getting that good. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions.
We do have time for one question. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm not familiar with JOVE, so probably my question is it was pretty. I know that Radio JOVE started with analog receivers that were small and probably low bandwidth, and so the requirement for a spectrographer was necessary. That's still what's happening in the hardware. But now SDRs come together with the waterfall display, and that's a spectrum analyzer, and they can be very nice to configure that easy. I'm asking, what is the spectrograph better? What is the advantage of using this spectrograph instead of a waterfall?
Yeah, so the typical professional, spectral output is frequency time, and so we're mimicking that with the spectrograph software. It's certainly, the waterfall.
No, if I reverse the
waterfall.
Yeah,
The waterfall display is basically giving you the same. Now you can we have sweep frequency receivers that were custom built by Dick Black. Some of us are still using. But so the software is, we're also trying to make it a bit more uniform for anybody doing Radio JOVE. We all have the same end unit, so to
but
speak.
for one starting into researching radio bursts or Jupiter images, they can start easily with the SDR, the dipole antenna, and whatever
Absolutely,
SDR software is available.
absolutely. And there's SDR software that comes with, in our case, the SDR Play model. There is software that comes with it that allows you to see the waterfall display. Oh, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
The other question is about the archiving. You say that you archive data. What's archived? The IQ information, the digital data sample, or videos or pictures? What is archived actually?
So we have the ability for people to archive just the images, screenshots if they want to do it that way. If they have audio files, they can upload audio
Audio of what?
of any of the frequencies they've
Yeah,
observed. So
there's like 20 megahertz back.
Yeah.
What's the audio there? It's a 20 megahertz wide spectrum. There's
no, so they're picking a one channel of the 500 channels or 400 channels that were across the 8 megahertz. And because I think Richard mentioned earlier that Jupiter has a particular sound to it. When you hear the audio of Jupiter, you can actually tell that it's Jupiter.
Russian waves or.
Yeah. And the solar bursts have sort of their own characteristic sound, so some people upload the audio, but most people upload the spectrograph files themselves from Jim's lab.
And are they stored on a central server or local on the computer?
No, they're archived at a central server that we operate, Radio JOVE operates. And so anyone with anyone can upload data with by register. Essentially, we require people to register, so we know who it is that's uploading data.
Okay, the last question. So this is as a kit, and it's like $200, let's say, including antenna software. No, antenna, sorry, the software, the radio.
And the antenna, but no poles.
No cost.
Yeah.
But can one just download the software and get away with that? So I have hardware, I have everything. I don't have the
Yes.
spectrograph.
Everybody in this room probably has the hardware needed to do Radio JOVE without having to buy anything. But for part of the reason we started it as a kit is for, again, someone new to get involved, entry-level project. And besides some rope and PVC and some tent stakes, here's everything. So that way you didn't have to go out and hunt and buy it yourself. So it's just another option.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.